A group of train robbers climbs aboard a freight train as it makes its way through California's Cajon Pass. Railroad police move in. They try to stop them. One of the suspects pulls out his pistol and opens fire at the railroad police. Fortunately, this time, the police officer wasn't hit. This sounds like something out of the Old West, old California, 150 years ago. The problem is, this was last week. This was August 10th, 2026. And believe it or not, train robbery is still a serious problem. My name is Mark Magana, and this is Railroad Economics, where we discuss the business behind the trains.
What's the trouble, officer?
Train's being robbed.
You're crazy. Nobody robs trains anymore. I'd say you've been misinformed.
That's a little clip from the movie Tough Guys with Kirk Douglas and Burt Lancaster. It's from the 80s. I'm not saying it's great cinema or anything, but if you like trains and you like 80s comedies, I would check it out. But the comment seemed oddly appropriate because even 40 years ago when that movie was made, the notion that people were still robbing trains was ridiculous. And fast forward to 2026 and what? That's still a thing? Are you kidding me? Well, it's a thing and it's becoming a bigger and bigger thing. According to the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department, BNSF Railway Police encountered people suspected of burglarizing rail cars. And these weren't containers just sitting unattended in a rail yard. This was on a moving train. Investigators say one of the suspects fired his pistol in the direction of BNSF police officer. There's conflicting reports. I've read two different things. One report says the railroad police did fire back. Um, I'm not sure which is true there, but I imagine they probably did. Fortunately, the officer was not hurt, and the train continued north before eventually stopping, where the police searched the rail cars that were believed to have been entered. 2 days later, investigators arrested five suspects. And when police searched the vehicle they were traveling in, they said they found tools used to burglarize trains. I don't really know exactly what those tools are. I've never robbed a train, but I imagine bolt cutters and things like that. I really don't know for sure. Lockpicks. I don't know what you use to rob a train. The one suspect was arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. The genius that decided to shoot at the police, cargo theft, conspiracy, etc. The others all face uh, cargo theft and other related allegations and charges. Now, nobody's been convicted yet. I want to point that out. Everybody's presumed innocent until proven guilty in this country. But this certainly seems like a situation where we know what's going on, and it was not an isolated incident. I want to be clear about that. This wasn't some random one-off. I'm sure, like me, when you hear the words train robbery, you picture a steam locomotive and a guy on horseback wearing a bandana over his face, right? Modern train robberies, they look a little different. The FBI actually generally calls it railroad cargo theft rather than train robbery. And it can happen in rail yards and intermodal terminals. That's kind of what makes sense to me because containers are sitting there. There's security, but a train yard's a big place, so that's kind of where I thought this stuff maybe happened. But that's kind of like the simple, easy way to do it. A lot of this stuff is starting to happen more and more on moving trains, if you can believe it. And that is something the FBI classifies as a strategic railroad cargo theft. It's very organized. This is not just some random group of guys going out and being like, "Hey, Let's rob that train tonight. This is organized crime. According to preliminary figures from the Association of American Railroads, America's major freight railroads reported more than 75,000 cargo theft incidents in 2025. 75,000. And the reported losses over $200 million. So this got me wondering, what are people stealing? What is so interesting on a train? And I thought of Breaking Bad and Walter White. If you watch that show, they siphoned some valuable chemicals they needed out of a tank car. Like, is that what's going on? What are people stealing? And the answer, not surprisingly, when I looked into it, is, well, anything that's valuable, portable, and easy to sell, which is a lot. Nike shoes in particular have become one very interesting target. In January of 2025, a BNSF train traveling through Arizona was carrying a shipment of unreleased Nike shoes, shoes that had not been seen in stores yet. Federal prosecutors said approximately 1,900 pairs, or more than $440,000 worth of shoes, were stolen. Other cases have involved power tools, electronics, clothing, other household products. In October of 2025, Los Angeles police recovered about $1.4 million worth of stolen train cargo in a single investigation. And that included some Nike shoes, Milwaukee tools, and other electronics. If somebody will buy it, odds are somebody is probably also willing to steal it. Here's the part I find fascinating, and I couldn't wrap my head around this. How on earth do you rob a freight train that's moving across the country? Well, you have to stop the train. Federal prosecutors have described organized groups using incredibly dangerous techniques. One of the criminals will hop onto the train and then they cut the air hose. Now, those air hoses, that's part of how the brakes work. They're in between every single car, they hang right below the couplers. And if you know anything about trains, you know what happens next. And if you don't worry. I'll I'll run through it. But that loss of air pressure in those air hoses, that causes the brakes to be applied immediately. It's a very important safety feature. Air brakes on trains I'm sure one day going to be entirely their own video. There's a fascinating history there with the Westinghouse. That's another day though. But these criminals though, they have figured out that this safety feature, which is so important, it can also be exploited. They cut the airline, the pressure drops, and the train goes into emergency. Federal prosecutors say organized train thieves have used this technique to control where the train stops. Now they can break into specific containers, unload merchandise right alongside the tracks. Another criminal crew arrives in vans or box trucks. They load up the stolen merchandise and they all leave. That's essentially what federal prosecutors described in the $440,000 Nike case. A BNSF train was immobilized in Arizona when the air hose was cut. Cases of Nike shoes were found alongside the tracks, and law enforcement later found vehicles nearby that prosecutors say were being used to retrieve them. That's not exactly Jesse James jumping from a horse onto a steam locomotive, is it? But the idea is basically the same. It hasn't changed much. Stealing, stealing. Find something valuable, stop the train, take it, get out. Same old story from the late 1800s. And this is where train robbery becomes railroad economics because the value of the stolen merchandise, that's only part of the cost. A stopped train is stopped, which means it's not moving freight. Depending on where it stops, the trains behind it may have to stop moving also. Then there's the damaged equipment that has to be repaired and replaced. Customers file claims for lost cargo. And railroads have to spend money trying to prevent the next robbery. That means cameras, fencing, lighting, sensors, and of course, the railroad police. Yes, big railroads really do have their own police departments. BNSF employs certified law enforcement officers who patrol the railroad and investigate crimes, including cargo theft. BNSF says it spends millions of dollars on fencing, lighting, surveillance systems, and police staffing. Union Pacific has made similar investments, including more than 41,000 feet of walls and fencing in targeted areas around Los Angeles. And we'll come back to Los Angeles in a second. The Union Pacific has also hired additional special agents. They're using GPS tracking technology. It's all there to detect theft. The railroads also work with shippers on how containers can be loaded and better secured. Union Pacific, for example, recommends putting the more expensive merchandise towards the front or the nose of the container, away from the doors. That way, thieves can't reach it very quickly. Think about the economics of that. Someone steals a shipment of shoes, and suddenly the railroad is paying for police, cameras, fences, GPS sensors, and additional security across thousands and thousands of miles of railroad. And those costs don't necessarily stay with the railroad. Cargo theft can mean delayed shipments, insurance claims, and higher transportation costs. If somebody deliberately stops a train to steal one container, hundreds of other containers on that train are now delayed. And they had absolutely nothing to do with the robbery. That's why the railroad industry increasingly treats cargo theft as more than a property crime. It is a supply chain problem at this point. And it's serious enough that the FBI now specifically investigates railroad cargo theft alongside railroad police and other federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies. And that brings us back around to the Cajon Pass in California. A freight train moves through a mountain pass in California. People climb aboard and allegedly begin breaking into rail cars. The police arrive. Guns come out. Shots are fired. More than a century ago, that story might have involved a steam locomotive and a posse and a sheriff. Today, it involves a modern freight train. It still involves sheriffs and their deputies. Now it involves aircraft. The CHP had aircraft in the air, as did the San Bernardino County Sheriff. Now there's all kinds of electronic surveillance and technology, all to prevent organized cargo theft. The horses are gone, the steam engines are gone, but there are still trains carrying millions of dollars worth of merchandise through thousands of miles of relatively isolated territory. And as long as that's true, there will apparently, sadly, still be people trying to rob them. Train robbery has not disappeared, it's just modernized. And one thing that is particularly disturbing, there's huge railroad presences in many cities, but Chicago's like the biggest. That's just because it's where everything meets. And there is theft problems in the Chicago rail yards, but it's not as bad as California. Southern California now accounts for half of all the train robberies in the country. It is out of control. And saying this as a native Californian, I don't live there anymore. I haven't lived there for a few years now, but uh, a lot of what you see on the news about the problems the state has, etc., they are true. And it seems to, the crime is just getting worse. And this is another example of that. And I'm not here to say what the answers are or aren't, but when half the train robberies in the entire country are taking place in one region, that says a lot. And it's sad. And let's also consider in the last video I did, I talked about how some of the railroads wanted to go from two-man crews, an engineer and a conductor, to just an engineer. when we have all these robberies taking place, would you want to be alone on a train that's getting robbed? I mean, obviously, you don't want to be on a train that's getting robbed, period, but would you really want to be alone? The air brake snaps, and the engineer's going to have to get out, walk like a mile, find out what's going on. Maybe it's just a minor problem, or maybe he encounters a gang of thieves. Scary stuff. I I wouldn't want to be in that engineer's shoes. I'm sure you wouldn't either. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Railroad Economics. When I started this channel 40 episodes ago, I really didn't occur to me I would be doing an episode on train robberies, but here we are. So, um, I thank you so much for watching, and please like and subscribe and do the stuff. And I will see you tomorrow with another video.